So thank you, Bonnie, and hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you all could be here today. This session, as Bonnie stated, is part of the Agents of Change series, and we're focusing today on cultural responsive leadership and social work. Again, I'm Dr. Karen White. I've been a social worker and an educator for over 15 years across schools, communities, and clinical settings. And I bring a multicultural lens, both as a Caribbean and Asian American woman, which really influences how I see leadership, identity, and equity. What we'll do today is not a lecture per se, it's a conversation. But since we're a large group, I'll ask that you use the chat box to share reflections. And you don't have to feel pressured to respond to everything, but when you can, type a thought or a reaction. That way we can keep the energy interactive while also respecting our time. My goal here is for you to leave today with both insights and practical tools that you can apply to tomorrow. So let's take this hour together to lean in, reflect, challenge ourselves. And before we dive in, let's ground ourselves in a few agreements. No one here is expected to have all the answers. And if you feel like you need to take a break, please feel free to do so. But like Bonnie mentioned, you do need to be here for 80% of the time. Respect the different perspectives of people in the room. We grow when we listen, or in this case, read off the chat. And just a heads up, we will touch on race, systemic inequities, and microaggressions. So some of this may feel heavy. Remember that this space is about learning, not perfection. If something resonates with you, drop a quick word in the chat. That small interaction again will help the energy in the room. So let's start with a quick check-in. I'd like for everyone to drop a number in the chat. And it will be a 1 if you're unsure where to begin, 2 when you feel like you need to grow and you need more tools, and 3 if you're confident in mentoring others. So just drop your number into the chat, how you feel about cultural responsive leadership, and then we can see where people are at. It's great to see that there's a mix. This is great. And that's actually a strength. I don't want people to see it as, a flaw. Some of us are just starting out, some of us are in the middle, and some of us are guiding others. And that's what makes this great. So even in silence, we're learning alongside one another. So keep going. This is great. Threes. I see threes. I see twos. I see ones. Great. Okay. Great. So what do we mean when we say culturally responsive leadership? Bonnie's catching up on the slides with me. Thank you. Okay, so what do we mean when we say culturally responsive leadership? To me, it's about leading in a way that puts equity, humility, and systemic awareness at the center. Not just managing tasks or people, it's asking, how do my decisions affect people differently? Who gets left behind? Who gets silenced? And here's the key, it's not the same as cultural competence. Competence suggests mastery, as if culture is something that you can check off a list after training. Responsiveness is different. It's ongoing, it's about humility, it's about curiosity and constant growth. Think of it as moving from I know about culture to I'm responsive to culture in every decision I make. Now, let's be clear what cultural responsive leadership is not. It's not about food, flags, and festivals. Culture is much more deeper than celebrations. It's not a diversity training that you attend once and say you're done. It's not a checklist or a buzzword. Cultural responsiveness is a way of, cultural responsive leadership is a way of showing up every single day. It's asking, whose voice is missing here? Who benefits? Who's harmed? That shift from surface level to deep level thinking is what separates responsive leadership from performative gestures. So go to the next slide. So let's break down the core elements. Cultural humility is recognizing that we will always be learners. No matter how many degrees we hold or how much experience we have, culture is bigger than us. Okay. Critical consciousness is another step, developing the ability to see systems of oppression and inequities, not just individual incidents. Critical consciousness is developing the ability to develop the ability to see systems of oppression and inequities, not just as individual incidents. So again, it's about noticing the bigger picture, not just saying, okay, I recognize that someone has a cultural difference, but recognizing how it plays into their experiences and how it comes, they bring all of that to the table. So once again, equity focused decision making again is moving beyond equal treatment to fair treatment. Equal means everyone gets the same thing. Equity means people get what they need. So equal is not always fair. Okay. So then there's relational trust, and that's showing up with authenticity and vulnerability so others feel safe to bring their full selves. Now think about your own leadership. Which of these comes naturally to you and which one challenges you? Would you say that you are have relational trust as an issue that you need to work on? Would you say that cultural humility is something you need to work on? Critical consciousness or equity focused decision? If you think about that and you think of which one challenges you, if you'd like, you can drop a quick word into the chat and just word can help capture where you're at. Okay, so let's apply this. Imagine you're supervising a social worker who says, I don't see color. I treat everyone the same. We've heard this before. It might sound good at first, but what's the issue? The reality in saying, I don't see color, it erases people's lived experiences. It suggests their identities don't matter. As leaders, we have to lean into that discomfort. A culturally responsive leader might say something that says, I hear that you want to treat people fairly, but it's important to recognize how identity impacts people's experiences. Ignoring that doesn't create fairness, it creates invisibility. Another example is a clinician notices a student from a refugee family avoiding group activities. A quick judgment might be that student's non-compliant, but a responsive leader would pause. They might ask, what's happening beneath the surface? Could cultural differences be influencing participation? Could past trauma make this group setting feel unsafe to this young person? That shift from judgment to curiosity changes everything about how we support people. It moves us from one perspective of labeling behavior to understanding context. So, some of the barriers to cultural responsive leadership. Next slide, please. We can talk about those. Time and workload. Some of us are stretched thin. It's easy to say, I don't have time to reflect today. You can also say fear of making a mistake. I've heard colleagues say, I'd rather stay quiet than say the wrong thing. But silence sends a message just the same. Organizational resistance is another one, that dreaded phrase, but we've always done it like this. Everything, we've been always working like this. Why do we have to change? So if that sounds familiar to some of you, that's one of the other barriers to cultural responsive leadership. And then we have our own biases. We carry them. All of us do, even if we don't like to admit it. So naming these barriers doesn't make us weak leaders. It makes us stronger because you can't solve what you won't name. So how do we overcome those barriers? First, we need to normalize discomfort. Mistakes will happen. What matters more is whether we acknowledge and repair them, and we need to build accountability structures. Maybe it's trust in a colleague that we need to talk, a trusted colleague we need to talk to, and we need to have a conversation with them, or a peer check-in that will keep us grounded and we can understand equity is on the agenda. We can use reflective supervision to slow down and ask the hard questions. And we can keep advocating for systemic change. It's not enough to make small fixes if the larger system is inequitable. So I'm going to give you a case scenario. I'm hoping that everyone can join with me and share in the chat. The next slide should be Jordan. We went a little. Oh, thank you. So the next one is case scenario. We're going to talk about, excuse me, we're going to talk about Jordan. So um, Jordan reflects a reality of many of our clients, our colleagues, and even some of us might face this. Jordan is a 29-year-old Black non-binary team lead. And he says that they say that they feel invisible in leadership spaces. What does that mean to you if you feel invisible in leadership spaces? Again, I'm going to read it again. Jordan is a 29-year-old Black non-binary team lead and says that they feel invisible in leadership spaces. Jordan doesn't say anything. They say they don't belong. They're already a leader. What they're naming is a lack of recognition, voice, and cultural affirmation. And that's something we as mental health professionals and leaders can't ignore. So let's frame it from language that our audience understands. Invisibility is trauma-informed language. It's survival response to spaces that erase parts of our identity, race, gender, voice, ideas, either subtly or systemically. So let's think for a moment. Have you ever supervised or worked along someone like Jordan? What did the leadership do, or what didn't they do? Did they hear Jordan? Did they listen to to their experience? So you can also ask yourself again, if Jordan is your colleague, what would you do to help Jordan? Let's speak to the leadership response. A cultural responsive leader wouldn't say, we didn't mean to do anything. They'd say, thank you for trusting me with that, Jordan. Can you help me understand more? And how can I better help you? They'd recognize that invisibility is not a personal issue. It's a structural one. Leadership isn't about who's in the room. It's about who feels safe, valued, visible, and once they're there, that's the work of cultural responsiveness. So again, when we look at cultural responsiveness, we need to understand that everyone comes with their own lens and that we can't humiliate or belittle someone because they're not at the place where we're at as in our growth as a leader. So if you could drop in the chat, um, oh, I like what Ann said, invite them into our space. Yeah, that's a good one. I can't read the whole thing, but if I can, let's see. I'd like to see.
Yeah, I can go ahead and share that.
Oh,
Anne is sharing, invite them into our space and give them safe area to be themselves.
thank you. Could you share more of what's being shared in the chat? Because I can't see it.
Yeah, a little bit earlier, we had someone ask, I don't have a name from this person, but they did share, it's hard for some folks in leadership to acknowledge the issue that is real, and it might not be their reality.
That's true, and that's a very good point. It might not be their reality. I can speak from experience, having worked in several schools. Teachers would say some things that about students. Why don't they have on socks, or why aren't they, responding to? And the parents aren't responding the way the teacher expects them to. And we need to understand that culture comes into play when we're working with people, obviously, and that the unfortunate part is that if people aren't willing to, and you're all here, so I'm preaching to the choir, but if we're all not willing to learn and understand that people come with different perspectives and experiences, that can be an issue that we will have a problem with working with people who, as a social worker, as a cultural responsive leader. So what might it look like to invite them? So if you were to have the conversation, could you read that one for me? What would it look like?
Yeah, what might it look like to invite them into our spaces?
All
Provide.
right. So, and that's a great question. So, what it could look like is if you had a conversation, you speak to the supervisor or the colleague and say, "I'd love to speak with you, and share with you the what the person that they don't know much about lives through." In my instance, I shared that going to the laundromat for certain people, we walk in some of us walk in our house, we open the door, the washing machine and dryer is right there, and we just wash our clothes. For many people, just washing clothes is a chore because they need the money, they need the time if they have many children, getting to the laundromat. So understanding where people are at in life is something that some people don't have the opportunity to, or they don't try to do. So someone said have an open mind. That is a good one. I think what benefits everyone is that if you work from a place of you're not persecuting the person that you're speaking to. You're not trying to chastise them that they don't know something, or that you're not coming from an educating point of view that feels like it's overwhelming them, but that you're sharing. It's coming from a place of concern, more that you just want to share and have them understand where people are at. Um, I like that if you wanted to engage your colleagues or your supervisor, whoever, in this conversation, that you give them some opportunities to engage with the client and hear the client story themselves. So maybe you share a bit, we don't usually share much when we share with our supervisors, in the respect that we don't give the entire breakdown, but you could give them a bit of the client's struggles and what their trials and tribulations are. So you say, I know that Miss So and so is going through a hard time. She's not working right now, and in her household, the husband is the breadwinner, and she doesn't really do much of the engagement with me as she could, because her husband is the one who tells her what she can and cannot say. So, in some cultures, that is a big thing, where the female is not the dominant um, spokesperson for the home. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. Um, any other comments that I should respond to before we move on? Okay.
There is a few more,
Okay.
just mentioning, Georgia mentioned, of course, we're wanting to provide opportunity of expression through feelings and thoughts and pausing, creating a safe space. So that's being shared in the chat. Um, Also being able to start where the individual is, listening to provide support. We have a question here from Megan.
I like that question. Can you read it out loud,
Yeah.
please?
How do we actively call out leadership if there's not a sense of safety present?
Well, so that's a good question, Megan. And that's one that you would tread lightly. I don't want anyone to go out there and put themselves out there where they could potentially lose their job, so to speak. But I think that it's important that you highlight the issue to the supervisor. I think that it's important that you make it known to the colleagues that you work with that this is an issue, and get their feedback as well. And excuse me. And I think that it's important that when you speak with the supervisor, that you come from a place, again, not of beratement, not one that is trying to chastise the supervisor, but one that is more of a reflective learning opportunity. So if the supervisor is giving you pushback, or this is how we've always done it, like I mentioned before, we don't do it like this here, then maybe it's an opportunity for you to assist the supervisor and ask that we can do a deep dive and understand how we can make the agency a better agency, and how we can help clients in a more productive and safe way. Because if we're doing it the same way we've always done it, maybe that's affecting which clients come through the door and how long clients stay with the agency. Anything else anyone want to ask?
If we have other questions, we can pop them in the chat. Also, see some of the really creative tools here, but we want to hear from you all first as well. Some other ideas that were shared here, of course, is inviting to meetings, offering lead roles to projects or workflows, or asking for input ideas.
Mhm. So that's also, I would also say we could reflect on why, and I said that before, why maybe clients aren't coming, or maybe clients aren't returning to the agency. So if in Jordan's case, you can he can understand and work with the supervisor to say that, as a team lead, especially in his case as a team lead, he has the he was given the responsibility of being a leader. So he should, show that he's taking the lead, um, and that he has the initiative, like you said, meet with the staff. I would do a needs assessment of the staff and see what they feel is missing, and that's one way to understand how else they can help the clients. Because if the agency is giving some resistance, then maybe if the other staff workers and other colleagues show that this is something that's important, then hopefully the administration would follow suit. I just saw something pop up that looked interesting. That's in the chat.
Yes, they're asking, when working with clients from cultures where the women aren't seen as outspoken, how would you interact with them to ensure you respect that without letting your own women empower beliefs peek through?
That's a great question. That's an actually great question. So, in my instance, when that's happened with me, what I've done is I've respected, like you said, the cultural differences, and that the female is not the lead voice in the household. But I also advocate for her to speak to me and share her feelings, understanding that we we as a team, she and I, we are not working to overtake her male husband or her husband, the voice in the household. We're not looking to overtake it, but we're also not letting her be silent when she's sitting in that room with you sharing. So her voice is just as equally important, and it's important that you let her know that because obviously when she goes home, she knows that her voice is for the most part silenced, but we can help her to feel empowered when she's in that room with you speaking, and to make her feel as though we will find a way to work to get her to the results that she wants. So in my case, I remember that there was a mother who wanted her child to go on a trip, and the father is completely adamant against the child going on any trips with the school. And the mother didn't know what else to do. So obviously, myself being a female, the father wasn't really engaging with me, but we made it in such a way that if the child, what is it that the father needed in order to feel comfortable with the child going on the trip? And once we got to that place, and we met with the father, and we asked him, since because he is the voice that resonated throughout the meeting and is the household voice. We asked him what he felt was most comfortable that he would allow the child to go on the trip. And when he gave us that feedback, we took that, and that was how we were able to get the child to engage with their classmates and be a part of the activities. So that's a good question. Okay. So let's talk about some practical tools. Okay. So when you use the identity wheels in staff trainings, it helps people reflect on their own culture before they talk about others. So you can ask people to understand what their culture and experiences have done or brought them, and then we can explain how it's different from other cultures. In my household, it's more or less a matriarch led household, and so that can cause problems with some of the men in the household, right? Because a woman is the lead here. But when in some other households, it's different. But understanding your client, and you're not bringing your own issues to the table, but understanding the client is first always, understanding where the client is at and how we can understand how to help the client best, and not impose our beliefs and our belief system on the client. We can also ask equity questions. Who benefits? Who's left out? So if we understand that in the case with the young man who wanted to go on the trip, the young man would have been left out. He wouldn't have benefited. But if we found a way that we could work with him and his parents so that he could get the best out of the experience. Excuse me. And the father, after that, believe it or not, he would come to me and speak to me after that. It was an interesting dynamic switch. He became more vocal than his wife to me. He would come up to me and approach me. He saw me as an ally after that, because we had allowed his voice to be heard, and he realized that. So that's important. And then it's very important to practice your own self-reflection and your own biases, because this is a lifelong work. This doesn't happen overnight. And my bias initially when I got to the school, because why do I have to talk to the father? The mother's the one who comes in. I never see the father. This is ridiculous. I have to wait to speak to him. And realizing that the mother was going to meet with me, but nothing was going to get resolved. Changes weren't happening. Things that she wanted done weren't getting done. I realized that it was important that I did need to speak with the father. And I also had to understand how to approach the father. It wasn't as simple as, I need to speak with you, come in. It was more in the lines of a team. I'd love to help you with your son. I'd love to work with you. So it's always a team effort, because that's less daunting to a parent, especially the male figure in the household. They don't feel as though you're here to pressure them. You're not telling them what to do. So that becomes very important. And then another practical tool that we can use for our colleagues, we can mentor emerging leaders from underrepresented backgrounds. Representation matters, and it changes organizations from the inside out. So if your organization looks like everyone looks the same, there's a place to start there. There's a voice that's missing. There are voices that are missing that need to be heard. And it's important that if you are the sole person who represents for people who don't all look the same, if you're the non-binary, if you're the woman in the team, it's important that you bring your voice to the table, but that you're not the only voice, and that you make it clear to the leadership and administration that there's more voices like yours need to be brought in so that there's a collective. It's not just one strand that everyone's hearing from, but that it's everyone collectively. And that's what makes a better agency, believe it or not. And I'm sure that if you could get that across to your supervisors, your administration, and if you are the leader of the agency, understanding that a multitude of voices, different voices from different cultures, from different experiences, only makes your agency a stronger and a better agency. That's very beneficial. So these might sound like small tasks, but over time they create a cultural shift that lasts. So I think that it's important that we understand that if people don't they're scared. I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to. They're scared or apprehensive is a better word. Apprehensive for different voices because, like we've said before, the agency's always done it one way. We've never done it differently. Let's look at the clients that we're serving. The clients that we're serving need to hear from every different type of voice. They need to understand that there are different experiences at the table. So that way it allows them to feel comfortable in sharing because only when they share can we actually help the clients that we're serving. So that's important also. And I'm going to ask you all to share in the chat. What's one step you could take this week toward moving towards responsive leadership? If there's something or a question that you have about how you can move towards responsive leadership, but if there's one thing you could do to move towards cultural responsive leadership, I'd love for you to share it in the chat. Needs assessment. SWOT. Yes. Yes, I actually love needs assessments. I do them all the time, not only with staff, but with clients. And with clients, I make them short. I don't want them to be overwhelmed. So it's no more than 5 to 10 at best. Um, and it's not questions as much as it is focused areas with 3 or 4 points, and they can choose what they feel out of the 3 or 4 options that I give. Because if you make it open-ended, that is a bit overwhelming. So the needs assessment will give you a focus on where to start and where to go. And when you take that to leadership, if you're not in leadership, that's a great way to show them what's missing and what's needed within the agency and how to go about getting those changes. I saw some others, Bonnie.
Yes, we have them also mentioning being a listening ear and use the SWOT tool. I love posting the equity questions of who's being left out and who benefits.
Okay. So yeah, that's a great one. Who's being left out and who benefits? And that's a good one. I'm trying to see how.
There's also coming from Debbie, talk about, I had posted the question that you asked. And then Debbie mentioned, talk about the subject at the next staff meeting. That's definitely an important part,
Yes.
bringing up
Yes.
those topics again.
Someone put Carmen P. wrote, in many cases, the social worker may be the only culturally competent person. So remember, cultural competence and culturally responsive leaders are two different things. So I agree with you what you're saying, though. Culturally competent, you might be the only culturally competent person in the agency. So educate at every opportunity. That's very true, Carmen. And I would also add to that, that as you're educating, it's not coming from, again, a place of beratement or, this is what you need to do, but more of a place of, I've been noticing this, or this is what I think would work better, or this is an opportunity for you to share with your colleagues things that they don't know about the clients that we're serving. So someone wrote, understand how my client's cultural identity intersect with mine and how they don't even if we are from the same ethnic group. That's a great one also, because you and I could both be from the outside in, people say, "Oh, she's African American or she's black," but again, I shared with you in the beginning that I'm Caribbean and of Asian background. So just because we look alike or we live in the same neighborhood, our experiences could be completely different. And so that's a very important thing to understand, that you can't just take it at face value that someone who looks like you has experienced the same things that you've experienced. So that's a completely, I agree with you 100%. So thank you for sharing that one. Um, so uh, I'm going to also say, and I failed to mention this, that these gestures that you're doing don't have to be grand. It's just like starting a conversation with a colleague. Maybe you revisit a policy through an equity lens. If you go through some of your policies, that might, and I can tell you one in the school system, everyone who comes in must have an ID to come in the door. And I remember this being a big issue, especially during COVID. And first of all, offices are closed, and there are people, we have parents who are undocumented. And showing an ID, even if they have one, is scary for many people. And so they wouldn't let the parents come in the building. The parents couldn't meet with me. And so I would go downstairs to the lobby, meet the parent. We'd even go outside for a walk around the block, because there was no way I was going to make them feel as if they were excluded, or as though because you don't have an ID, you can't come into the building and I can't meet with you. There's got to be some way that they can get the meeting to happen, correct? So I would go outside, walk around the building with them. I would sign them in to the building, say that I vouch for them. But that was a big issue with the ID. I remember the system hasn't changed. However, it has been, I won't say it hasn't changed. They have altered it a bit where now you can come downstairs as the social worker, sign in the parent, and escort them back upstairs. So if they don't have a photo ID, it is okay. So that's a example that I'm sharing with you on how I didn't make a policy change per se, but I was able to find a way to make it work for the parents that we were serving who didn't have an ID. So that's a great one. And again, you don't have to share out loud, but if you want to drop it in the chat like you have been, I welcome all that you've been saying, because all of that is so true about how we can help our clients. Is there anyone? Oh wait, someone wrote something that I wanted to see. Hold on. Understand how my client's culture identity. Oh, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the Zoom person. That's a great one. Is there anything else that anyone could think of that they feel that they have? Do you have an example of a SWOT analysis that you use? So actually, I do. I can share it with Bonnie afterwards and give it out, but I don't have my hands on it at this moment. I haven't used that in a while. If that's okay. Is that okay, Bonnie?
Yeah, of course. So we will share this recorded presentation along with the slides and any extra tools. So we'll definitely include that um,
Okay.
on the program. Thank you for
Okay.
that
All
question.
right. So, you said you might be the, we say that we might. Can you read that one, Bonnie, from Marisol? I'm not
Yes, we
understanding.
have this one a little bit longer. It says, when you said that we might be the only culturally competent person in the group, is that meaning competent in their own culture? I'm trying to differentiate between new terms as we're
Okay.
learning cultural competence, cultural humility, and
Right.
cultural
Right. And
responsiveness.
like I said before, cultural competence is not what we're speaking of today. We're speaking of culturally responsive leadership. So cultural responsiveness, excuse me, cultural competence is different than cultural responsive leadership. So I'm assuming that the person who mentioned cultural competence was understanding different cultures, and that's what she's saying. But when I'm talking about cultural responsive leadership, I'm talking about understanding people have different experiences. So cultural competence is saying that I understand this. You check off a box. I've had a training that I understand that people have some type of, everyone comes from a different place and that we all aren't from the same place. Where cultural responsive means that I recognize how my role as where I come from, whatever that is, how it interacts and those my experiences interact with someone else from another culture. So that's being because you're responding to that to the cultural differences. That's what cultural responsive leadership is different from cultural competence. So there's a lot of different terms, and that's when it often gets confusing. Cultural competence meaning that I'm competent in understanding different cultures. And that's something that's ongoing. That's not something that can happen in one training, but that's what agencies do. They say you had your cultural competence training and you can check it off and you understand that people are different. In cultural responsive leadership, you're saying that people are different as well as I am, and my own biases, my own viewpoint plays a part in how I see or treat other people. So that's the difference between cultural responsive leadership. Because as a leader, social work leader, your role is to not only engage and work with others, but to understand that your differences and their differences intersect and how they intersect. You might see people, like I mentioned, the young man who has the father. You might find yourself a bit apprehensive to wanting to deal with just the father. Why should I have to deal with him? But understanding that that's your bias and understand makes it even, I won't say easier, but makes it for a better opportunity for you to work with that client because you're more understanding to what the issues are that you're having with dealing with that family. Karma P, or what I meant was the importance of understanding, appreciating, and working together with all people. Okay, so Carmen was trying to, she's explaining what she meant by cultural competence. Yes. Okay, great. But yeah, so that's the difference between cultural responsive leadership and cultural competence. Cultural responsive leadership is not something that ends overnight. Once we have a training today, it's not over. This is just the beginning of the conversation. This is now you've had your lens has been opened. And now when you work with clients, you will take the opportunity to say, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing in relation to that client and how my culture plays a part in it, or how that client's culture and my cultures intersect. It doesn't always mean it's always going to be a positive intersection. It could be a negative one, but you're aware of it. And that's the important part of it, that you're aware of this. So that's I guess, hopefully answers the question. Did that help? I don't know who had asked that. Did that help? Okay. So I want to give you some that somebody was commenting. I want to give you some resources that you can use as well and understand. Again, cultural responsive leadership isn't a one and done achievement. It's a lifelong commitment. So it's not about having the right answer. It's about showing up, listening, and adjusting daily. So each time you meet with a client, understanding that each client again is not the same. Just because two clients are from Yemen doesn't mean that they have the same experiences. If two clients are African American, doesn't mean that they both deal with systemic racism or they handle it even the same way. So that's something that's very important. Um, and remember, leadership isn't about titles, it's about influence, advocacy, and courage. So each of you, wherever you are, you have the power of change in your hands. You are an agent of change, as the name of uh, this agency is. The agent, you are agents of change. So you have the opportunity to bring the voice to the table for those clients that are usually unseen, invisible, and feel invisible. That's important. So if there's anything else, I'm going to tell you some of the takeaways you should use. Always lean back on your NASW code of ethics. That's a great place to start. I used to carry it around with me everywhere I went. And now, believe it or not, one of my friends told me that she reads it every night. So I've taken to doing that because it's something that should be embedded in your role as a social worker. I think it's very important. And then there's Tervalon and Murray Garcia's writings on cultural humility. That's very important as well. That's a great piece um, that you can read on. I can give Bonnie those articles or links to those articles so that you could have them. Then there's Gerald Sue on racial microaggressions, which is a big one. I don't think a lot of people understand some of the things that are said on a daily basis to people that are such that are microaggressions that really sting and hurt. And if you said one to a client, you might send the client in the other direction. I can tell you from example, a young lady said to one of my colleagues that she didn't have an opportunity to get to the supermarket. And the social worker said to her, well, why don't you just have Fresh Direct or one of those delivery services, Peapod, delivered the groceries? And the client said, oh, I didn't even think about that. I don't know if they deliver where I live. And the social worker said, oh, they don't deliver to the hood? The client never came back. The client was turned off from services at least for 2 or 3 years. When she finally resurfaced, she shared that she's been apprehensive to come to sessions because she's worried that those type of microaggressions will come out. Yeah, Amy saying, "Oh my God, yeah, that was," and Courtney, that was a hard one because she needed the services, she needed to talk to someone, and when the social worker said that to her, and this is a seasoned social worker, this is not someone who, this is maybe 30 years in the field. And when she said it to her, she really sent the client in the other direction. So we have to be cognizant of how we come to the table. Something as simple as that. And some people joke around and say, well, I live in the hood and whatnot. But to say that to the client in the way that she did, it was very disheartening. So, racial microaggressions are, they're hurtful. They're small in what you say. They're big in how they say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words hurt, and that one has affected the client. Now we're in 5 years later. Akila said that's so unfortunate. The client could tell other people not to get services from that agency. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So um, I want you all to remember again, like I said, this is a lifelong commitment. It's not something that you just do overnight and we take this training and now, yay, you're ready to go out there. You are ready to go out there. But I want you to know that work on listening, work on understanding other people's experiences. Um, and I'm sorry, and one moment. And understand that if you take a piece of what the client has lived through, because you can't live it, but if you hear what they're saying and reflect on it, you're, even if you're not perfect, you're doing better than when you started, because we're all here to just try and help our clients. That's the one thing that we all got into this profession to do, that, to help everyone, and by empowering them and advocating for them. And if we don't know who we are, we can't advocate for someone else. So that's important. Megan wrote, a very privileged comment to assume that the person even has the time or the money to order groceries. That's true too. The client was like, she told me to go to Peapod, and it wasn't about really even the money. It was simply that she didn't know that they came to her zip code. Um, but yeah, and then Amy wrote, I recognize as a white female of privilege, I will never be culturally competent, but I can always be culturally responsive. And Amy, that's important. That's what it's all about. It's not about being culturally competent as we or but it is about being a culturally responsive leader. So understanding, that's the biggest part. The takeaway here is today that you understand that every client, no matter if they look the same or they don't, every client, their experiences are what shapes them. And that's what's important to understand. Khadijah wrote, I know a lot of times we're representing healthy relationship dynamics for clients, but how do you handle representing the token racial person within the therapeutic relationship of being one of the good ones? I felt that at times. So let me see if I understand what you're asking. So you're in an agency, and if I'm incorrect, put something in the chat, but you're in an agency and you're the only person, so you feel like you're the token person. um, and you're trying to represent a healthy relationship for your clients, even in that dynamic and where you're working at. I think I got it right. Okay. So that's a good one. And that's something where maybe you, Khadijah, might need to speak to someone, whether it be a colleague, a trusted colleague, or someone that you can speak to at the agency. And if it's a conversation you actually can have with your administration, I think it's one that if you feel comfortable and it's a good one that you can have, then I suggest that you have that conversation because or you might need to do more self-help for your take care of yourself in other ways. Do things that allow you to go out and enjoy something that you like to do. It's self-care is so important because burnout is a high factor in this profession. And so if you don't do self-care, and that's what this is all going to boil down to. If you have no one to speak to at the agency, then self-care is your best route. You're going to need to take care of yourself as best you know how, whether that means reading a book, going out for a walk, um, um, going out with friends. I like self-help books or self-care books, and I love adult coloring. I think that's one way. But the situation you're in, I don't want to say that you leave because if you're the only and you leave, then there's no one. And so I don't like when people say, "Well, I'm the only and I want to leave," because you're the one that opens the door for the others. So that's my suggestion. Um, and sharing with your client how to have or representing to your client how to have a healthy relationship. Um, you're you're doing the best you can. So it's as healthy as it can be for now. And so sometimes the work is in striving to get to a healthier relationship if you're not at the best healthy relationship you can be at the time. So yeah. Um, and I want you to keep one other thing I want to say is keep leading with purpose, keep the work going long after today. This is a conversation that does not end today. I welcome anyone who wants to reach out to me. Feel free to do so. At the end, I think that my contact information is shared. Um, could you go back one slide? I'm sorry. So, um, remember that cultural responsive leadership is leadership in practice. That's so important. I keep saying that to you. It's not perfection. No one's asking when you leave here to have all the answers and to, now go into your agency, say, this is what you need. That's not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to come from a place that you're more understanding, you're more aware. That's what this is truly about. It's about awareness. And again, with Khadijah, it starts with self, like you said, modeling or representing a healthy relationship to your client. It's about starting with you. So understanding who you are is important. We all have biases. Don't let that make you feel like, there's something wrong with you. We all come to the table with something. And it shows up in systems. So the policies that agencies create, the way that the agency culture is, that's where you'll see it. You'll hear the little conversations. Like I said, microaggressions don't happen just between client and and clinician. It also happens between clinicians. So be aware of that. Um, and CRL centers community. So the better you are at understanding who you are, the more engaged and the more healthier your community, whether it be the agency as a community or the agency and its clients as a community, the healthier it becomes. And small shifts create big changes. Remember, I went downstairs to meet the client at the door. Nobody did that before. Everybody stayed in their desk at their office. And when they saw me get up, they're like, "You're leaving?" I'm like, "Well, the client can come upstairs, so I'm gonna meet the client where the client's at." Get the joke? I said, "I'm gonna meet the client where the client's at," and everyone chuckled. But that's important. Small shifts create big changes. Suzanne wrote, "Work on rapport towards a repair." Can you?
I think that might be towards a question on
Oh,
how do you work towards repair if we've caused harm, even if it wasn't intentional?
that's a great question. Um, so the first thing is to acknowledge it and apologize. As simple as that. I'm sorry if I offended you. I'm sorry if what I said or what I did was offended you in some way. And now that you say that, excuse me, I can speak to it was Ramadan. And I had a student, she was fasting. she was a young girl, so this was her first year fasting. And I asked her, did she want a piece of gum? I didn't know she could not have anything. And the next day she came in and she said, I broke fast because I took the gum from you. I felt terrible. I literally wanted to melt in my chair. And so I apologized. Um, I went and spoke with her mom and apologized and said, if you all could teach me what is what does Ramadan entail? What is it that you can teach me that I can learn about Ramadan so that I understand what the holiday is about, what the season of Ramadan is about? How can I become a better steward to share with others? And that's as simple as it could be. I literally I didn't even know if I wanted to go ring the parents' doorbell. I felt horrible. I was young as a social worker at that time, and that was a learning moment for me. But that's the best you can do, Suzanne. You can apologize. You're coming from a place of true concern, and you're not trying to be mean about it in the sense that, well, I didn't know, or how would I have known? That you're not coming from that perspective. And so just simply to apologize and to say it's a learning moment. That's how you have to look at it. Don't beat yourself up. That's the most important thing because every day as social workers, we are going to forever be learning something. There's never a day when we're not learning something. Our clients can teach us so much if we are just open and we're listening. So, with that, I thank everyone. If there's any other questions, feel free to share them.
Yes, if we do have any questions, we've been able to answer all of them so far, along with the presentation. So if we have any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat now so we can go ahead and get your questions answered. I would like to ask, what would be ways in which leaders, supervisors, what are some reflective questions that they could ask themselves regularly to just assess their leadership responsibly?
That's a great question. I would, as a leader, I would ask myself, am I listening to my staff slash clients? Am I at the meetings engaged? Or is the staff comfortable coming to me and speaking to me about what they're feeling? And remember, I love needs assessments. So as a leader, I would put out a needs assessment. I would ask my staff, and I want them to truly be open, honest. I don't want anyone to feel as though I'm judging what they're saying. So it is truly a anonymous survey. And I usually do it in a Google Doc so I can aggregate the data, but I love to know what people are feeling because if there's something that is a consensus, then I would love to know what I as a leader can do differently. So I think that leaders need to always be attuned to what's going on in the agency, not sit at their desk and just disseminate directives, but instead to get down at the ground level, to understand how the client's feeling about the agency, which social worker, which clinician do the clients seem to gravitate more to, and why? Maybe that's the clinician who is really a culturally responsive leader, and they want to be with that clinician more. So, and if there are clinicians, and I also love this. I love using who we have at the agency, and when I say that, I mean turnkey. Each clinician has a strength. Every one of us has a strength. I would allow my clinicians to give on their weekly meetings, give a professional development presentation on something 15 minutes that they love, that they want to share, how they engage with non-responsive clients, how they work with such and such community. I think that's all important to understand that you have the agency has the strength within it. If they would only tap into who works there, their clinicians are brilliant. That's why they hired them. And if you have clinicians that you're not tapping into, look at what their strengths are.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. We really appreciate all this information. And of course, even some of the feedback here of being able to answer their questions along in this training. I'm going to go ahead and share some really important information with you all. And I want to thank Dr. White for giving us this presentation over leadership. And again, I hope that this takes us to that next step of how we can keep this mindset and how do we want to integrate this into our practice wherever we are. Again, and noticing that this is just one of the steps, and it's going to make much bigger change as we continue to learn around this.
Especially in this culture we're going through in this country right now, we need to understand that we need to be culturally responsive leaders. We can't do this without our clients, and our clients need us. So thank you.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.